Hello and welcome. I'm Patrick Curtis, your host and chief monkey, and this is the Wall Street Oasis podcast. Join me as I talk to some of the community's most successful and inspirational members to gain valuable insight into different career paths and life in general. Let's get to it. In this episode, Yuriy shares his path from Boulder to operations at Goldman in Salt Lake City back in 2007. Learn how he survived job cuts and got promoted, and why he eventually decided to get an MBA at Insead. Hear how he graduated with an MBA unemployed, but then how he was able to get his foot back in the door at Goldman at an unexpected team, only to be promoted again to a front office trading position on the fixed income desk. After 4 years, we learn why he risked it all to join a small 4-person startup trading cryptocurrencies, and how that led to his current role as head of trading at the fast-growing startup called Anchorage. Enjoy. All right, Yuriy, thanks so much for joining the Wall Street Oasis podcast.
Yeah, happy to be here, Patrick.
So it'd be great if you could give the listeners a short summary of your bio.
Absolutely. So I grew up in Denver, Colorado, went to the University of Colorado, served in the Colorado Air Force National Guard. After that, I went to Goldman Sachs for 5 years, took a break for an Insead MBA, went back to Goldman Sachs for another 5 years, decided to go to crypto afterwards, joined a quant hedge fund, did that for about a year and a half. And for the last 3 years or so, I've been at a crypto company called Anchorage.
Very cool. So let's start all the way back in undergrad. Did you always know, hey, you wanted to be in trading? And at Goldman, you were mostly on the trading side, right? So fixed income, what were you doing there?
Yeah, first 5 years, operations, supporting the fixed income desk. The next 5 years post MBA, money markets portfolio manager / trader. But to go back to your first question, as far as knowing what I wanted to do in college and undergrad, the answer is actually no. I was a enlisted troop in the Air Force, so I joined right after high school. And I always thought, basically up until my senior year, that I would be, once I got my degree, I would become an officer, a second lieutenant in the Air Force. And that was kind of the plan, to be a career military officer.
And so did you have family? Is that why in the Air Force, or?
Sort of. So all of the, on my dad's side, all the men, as far as we can track, through our ancestry, have been in the military in one way or another. But my dad was actually in the Soviet, army. So he was in Afghanistan back in the 70s. Wow. He was fluent in Farsi, Persian, Arabic, and everything like that. So I was the first member of the United States military. Very interesting.
So in terms of just when things changed, so when did you think, was it your junior year, senior year when you were at Boulder? Was it, when did it change? When did it shift? When was Goldman Sachs suddenly, operations there suddenly a viable?
Yeah, I would say that it was my senior year. I graduated in 2007, and I got a little bit lucky that, Goldman Sachs was opening their Salt Lake City office during that time. Right now it's a really big office with, thousands and thousands of people. But back then there was maybe under 100, and they were looking for someone, to join their operations team there. And it was the first year they came to recruit at the University of Colorado. So, I did a few interviews, got a little lucky. I'm sure I answered some questions right. And then, I was one of the 2 people chosen to go work there.
Don't be so humble. So what kind of questions I know it was 15 years now. How many years ago? 14 years ago or 13 years ago?
Yeah.
But like you said, I got kind of lucky. Do you feel like, obviously, like on the operations side, it's maybe not as competitive? Do you agree? Or do you feel like they were tough questions and like you barely got the job? Or what was your thought? And like, how big was the class size? Give us an idea of, at least back then, what you remember.
Yeah, I think it was the first time that that specific office really went outside of the University of Utah and BYU. So I think they did a lot of the, kind of regional schools. I think like UCLA was a big one, Texas, Oklahoma, Colorado. So I think they took 2 people from Colorado, and I think my class was around 15 to 20 people total, just from those kind of satellite schools from around, just outside of Utah. And the reason I say I was a little bit lucky, I'll tell you a little bit of the story of how this went. So I was a finance major, and I interviewed with a bunch of companies, all much lower tier than Goldman, and I basically didn't get any of the jobs. So after about 5 or 6 dings, I was kind of like thinking, all right, well, I'm going to go into the military because it's kind of what I wanted to do, and I'm going to go ahead and proceed with that career path. And one of my counselors said, well, look, the Goldman people are coming. Just go to the interview. Just you have nothing to lose. So I still prepped, of course, and did everything like that, did all my homework. But I was definitely a lot less nervous, I would say, for it. So I go into the interviews, I go through them, obviously answer all the questions and everything like that. And they, one of the final interviews, they asked me, these are the on-site ones where they flew you out. They asked me, Yuriy, have you ever worked at night? Because we just opened the PWM business. We're building it up in the Middle East, and we need some, support staff here in Salt Lake to work at night. And I said, well, yes, I've been an Air Force police officer. I was working from 6 p.m. to 6 in the morning at the Air Force Base, and then driving back to school in the morning. So they're like, oh, you're hired. When you have experience working night shifts, you can work night shifts here for us in Salt Lake City. So that's how that went.
Got it. Okay, so you suddenly you had this job, almost like a trade management job. So what were you doing through the night, providing support? Can you give us an idea of the first few years, what it was like, how it evolved, if at all, and why you were there for 5 years before kind of making a move?
Yeah, so it was your basic, trade management support analyst job. So we supported a lot of the, private wealth advisors, towards the later time zones in Asia and the Middle East. So they place trades. We make sure that they properly get processed. Everything gets reconciled. Your basic, trade support associate or analyst job, right? Mm-hmm. But yeah, I did that for about 2 years. I was pretty decent at it. It wasn't exactly hard. So I'm used to working 14-hour shifts. So I was never complaining about it. At least the office is nice and warm. In the military, they keep you outside where it's kind of freezing. So I was kind of just glad to be inside and have all the food and coffee that I wanted. So yeah, I excelled a little bit in the analyst role. Then they gave me a kind of a team lead role in the daytime. Then got promoted to associate. While half of my class pretty much either quit or got fired. So yeah, just had a pretty good path in operations.
Why do you think you moved up in operations so well? Why did you get that promotion while the other people kind of burned out? Is it just your personality? Is it something you did specifically on the job?
Yeah, hard to say. I guess I was good at just doing a lot of repetitive tasks without complaining. I think the military completely beats the notion of complaining out of you. So you just kind of, whatever tasks you get handed, you just kind of deal with it. So I already had that mindset for, there's 3-4 years being in the military. So I didn't really view the work as, awful or bad or anything like that. I just try to learn as much as I could. Every time one of my teammates was sick or, there was a move to a different team, I always try to learn their job. And I guess, my superiors kind of like that, the fact that I was just cross-training myself all the time. So I think that helped.
That's cool. And did you find Wall Street Oasis back around that time? Or I know you've been with us for 10 plus years. So
yeah, that's right. Wall Street Oasis was one of my favorite websites back then because, when I entered the operations world, it's kind of embarrassing to say, but I actually had no idea of the difference between banking or trading or, venture capital or anything like that, right? But I started kind of figuring out on the job that all right, well, my PWA is kind of like a client-facing person. All right, so in Wall Street Oasis, I started just reading everything about it, and it was kind of banking heavy. So I was like, okay, so I'm not even anywhere near investment banking. I'm in the trading division. So I started figuring out who was who, and I think Wall Street Oasis definitely helped me figure out what the different parts of finance and all the people that work in those divisions do.
So were you thinking once you started learning that stuff, hey, I want to be an actual trader? Is that what kind of pushed you toward going to Insead or eventually, or what was the goal to get the MBA to say, hey, I'm going to try to move more front office and make the decisions on the trades versus actually just execution and operations? Is it as simple as that?
Yeah, there's that. And so there was 2 reasons I decided to do the MBA. So number one was just like you said, when I moved back to the daytime away from, supporting the PWM businesses in Asia and Middle East, I was supporting the, all the trading desks in the GS asset management divisions. So, I would talk to the traders all the time and, I would visit New York sometimes to sit next to them, and their jobs just seemed a lot more exciting. And, I started following the markets a lot, reading a lot of macro research. So I was like, okay, I need to figure out how to do this. And I, of course, I had a really good relationship with a lot of the traders, just because I was always, I always supported them in the way that they kind of liked and was doing a good job. So, I always asked them, like, well, how do I get your job? And they said, well, take your CFA exams, take an MBA, and we'll have a spot for you. Just let us know, like, within a year of graduation, right? And then the other thing too, after working in ops for 5 years, and I was getting burnt out a little bit towards the end there, because ops jobs, like I said before, they're repetitive. There's always a mountain of work to do. There's a lot of things that aren't really automated. Even at Goldman. So I just needed a little bit of a break.
And that was even with moving up. You're still kind of doing the day to day. It was still repetitive, but it was more just title change, or was it like did the function change? You're overseeing a group, but you still had to do some of it too.
Yeah, exactly. Like every time somebody's gone, you as a team lead, you're kind of filling in for them. And then every time there's like a really big issue and a really pissed off trader or portfolio manager somewhere, you're kind of the one that has to, figure out how to solve the problem, because your junior analysts usually, you can't do it. So, there's a lot of that type of work that's usually a little bit more stressful. So yeah, that's where the burnout really comes from.
Is it typical for like a trader, like in, let's say, the fixed income division, to have a good relationship with somebody like you in operations and say, oh yeah, just go get your MBA or CFA and we'll have a seat for you? Is that typical, or is it, pretty rare?
I don't think it's typical, because I think, you need to absolutely provide the best support humanly possible. You need to basically be able to figure out what the trader wants before they even ask you. And then I think you, as an operations analyst, really need to not be nervous about asking them what you want and telling them how you feel, and do a lot of the research, on your own. For example, like when I see a bunch of trades come in, I see, what they are. And sometimes, I would look into what those companies are doing or what the pricing looks like. Maybe do some self-study and what things mean, and then maybe talk to the trader about them. And if you don't sound too stupid, maybe they'll be a little bit open to when you're actually telling them that you're interested in their job.
Interesting. So you kind of you're saying you kind of looked at the trade flow coming in to be able to make interesting conversation and do almost self-study on your own to try and figure out, okay, what's this job all about? How am I going to do it? How are they going about thinking about, like, whether it's macro ideas?
Yeah, exactly. Like, I'd see a position being built up, and then, maybe I see it sell off like later. So maybe I'll ask the guy, like, oh, well, you guys have been building this up for last month. Why are you selling it off? Like, does it have anything to do with like event A that I saw on the news, that was relevant to this industry? And the guys are usually pretty open about talking to stuff, as long as you are kind of informed.
So do you think that, was it like, in particular, like one or two people, like this is now like 2012, you're kind of approaching the MBA application process. Did you approach that conversation kind of before the applications to say, hey, is the MBA worth it? Or what was your thought process kind of like, and why Insead?
Yeah, exactly like that. By the time I started talking with the traders about actually like moving up, I definitely was already in my head. I knew that I didn't want to become VP in ops, because I knew that was kind of a move that gets you kind of focused inside that division.
Gets you locked in, basically. Gets you locked in there, kind of your pitch.
Yeah, exactly. Like one of the best pieces of advice I think I've ever received was, don't become vice president in a decision you don't want to be a managing director. And I think that's very true, because, if they look at your resume and you're like, all right, well, you were an associate, for, 3-4 years, fine, you can still come into a trading division. But if you're a vice president, and I kind of saw that when I was already on the trading desk interviewing people. If you have a VP, you're not going to hire him for a kind of a junior associate PM position, right?
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about just, why Insead, and, so you knew you wanted to make the move. You kind of had confirmed from some of these front office traders that like, yeah, they'd have a seat for you if you went and got the MBA. Why not the CFA? What was the decision to do the MBA?
Well, I did CFA actually in parallel as well. So by the time I applied to MBA, I already had level 1 and 2 knocked out.
Okay.
I was just kind of doing those on the side, and I was also doing all the series exams as well, just trying to do as much as I could just to kind of show these guys that I was serious about it. But the reason I chose Insead is again twofold. It seems like all my decisions have like two main reasons. One was, so look, I obviously wanted to go, obviously everyone in Wall Street Oasis says, look, top 10 or don't even go, right?
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, I got to get into the top 5, top 10 school. So Insead was like the only school that was 1 year long. And I was never, an honor student or a 4.0 guy or anything like that. So I was like, I'm not a good test taker or a student in general. So I figured, you know what, I'm going to do the 1 year program. It seems to check all the other marks. And then the other reason was, I've never ever stepped foot in Asia. And besides, obviously, growing up, from 0 to 8 years old in Russia, I've never really been to Europe. So I was like, wow. So I could go to this school that has a campus in France, a campus in Singapore, and I also get to do, they have an exchange with the Wharton school. So I get to experience Wharton for a semester. So I was like, this is perfect. So Insead was actually the only school I applied to at the time. And luckily, I got in, so I didn't really have to apply anywhere else. So it kind of just fit what I wanted to do.
That's awesome. Yeah, a lot of people don't know that it's just a 1 year program. Do you feel like was a disadvantage on recruiting, or you felt like it was already lined up for you, so it was just more like a check the box type of thing?
It was a little tough because there's 2 classes in Insead. One starts in December and you have the summer for an internship, and one starts in July and you kind of go all the way through for a year without an internship. And I chose the one without the internship because I just didn't think it through very well.
Yeah.
So yes, the recruiting was a little tougher. But having said that, I still interviewed with the MBB, consulting firms, and some of the top investment banks for associate banking roles. Those are super easy to get. Just being at the school. But, I always wanted to go into a trading role just because I was kind of used to it and I was in that environment.
Did you get offers from IB associate roles, or were you not prepped for that specific type of interview?
I made it. I was one of the last 3 people out of maybe 40 that applied for a Goldman Sachs London banking associate role, but I eventually did not end up getting it.
Wow,
that's as far
impressive.
as I got. I got dinged on pretty much everywhere else.
Yeah. So in terms of, you got a lot of looks obviously coming from Insead. So that's good to hear. In terms of so then, once you're kind of approaching, you have that full year, you're starting the summer and you kind of know you're going to be ending. At what point was Goldman in New York saying, yeah, come here and, you can be a trader with us?
Yeah.
Were you approaching the end of school and you didn't have a job lined up? Was it getting nerve wracking? What did you do?
Yeah, a little bit. I actually ended up graduating without a job, floated around for a little bit, but I knew I didn't want to take anything that I wasn't really passionate about. I just started really hitting up those Goldman traders that I used to work with. And eventually, one of them who, I still kind of remain close to, he told me about an opening. It wasn't a trading opening. It was actually, the role was an RFP writer for the GCM fixed income division. So my job was literally to just work on RFPs, which is definitely a full-time job we had I think a 5-person team doing that. And it's a very thankless job and it's very difficult. But the good thing about it is when you write RFPs that have hundreds of questions for institutional investors about different strategies, you actually get to learn those strategies really well. And you get to learn pretty much just about how the entire division operates because, the investment consultants and the institutional investors, they ask just about everything. So after writing these RFPs for a year and a half, I felt like I really got a good feel for how the entire fixed income division and the entire asset management division work.
And so how do you make that internal transfer? How did you eventually get off that RFP team?
Yeah, the way it works is, so whenever any trading or PM seat opens up, there's kind of a little bit of a feeding frenzy, right?
Yeah.
So you're not allowed to switch jobs for the first year and a half. So while I was sitting in this RFP role, I started noticing exactly how it works, how people start to apply, which people are successful, which people aren't. So I started trying to follow what all the successful people that were getting those seats when they opened up did. So you get to know the portfolio management teams. You obviously have to do a really good job in your role. And then, once the seat opened up after my minimum year and a half in the RFP seat, I went for it. It was with the money markets desk. And, luckily I took good notes, I guess, from what other people were doing. So I got the job.
What were the other people doing? Yeah, share those notes.
Yeah, look, obviously you need to understand what's going on in the strategy and how the desk makes money. That's the first and foremost. So look, money market desk, there was a lot of 2A7 reform that was going on of, how different commercial paper markets work. So, I just kind of dug into some presentations that, the desk was making for their clients, just learned kind of the intricate details of that stuff. Even if I didn't fully understand it very well, I was able to refer to it in the interviews and kind of, tell them what I thought about it. And, I think that's a lot more than other people did. I think like one of the things I actually see on WSO, that good advice that people give out is that, everybody seems to overestimate their competition, but the competition is usually like not that great. Like I was actually a little bit surprised, like how some people don't really do a lot of the homework when they're going for one of these seats. So just the fact that I read a bunch of stuff about the 287 reform, I think put me, ahead of some of the other candidates going for the seat.
Boom. So they're like, okay, yeah, you got it. And the rest was history. You had a good another 2.5 years or 3 years almost with that team. And tell me how that worked out, or what was it like day to day? And was it kind of what you expected?
Yeah, it was definitely the most fast-paced job I've ever had. You come in early in the morning because you're responsible for all the overnight repo and funding the rest of the division, making sure everybody have their trading lines lined up, and so you learn to talk to 20 counterparties, from 6 in the morning till 7, get all the trades lined up for the overnight roll. And, the faster you're able to do that and the more automated you get, the more responsibility they give you, because the senior PMs, they want to hand off as much stuff as humanly possible to you. So, the faster you learn, the more stuff you get. So that's kind of how to be successful in a junior PM role, is just take everything you can from the senior guys.
Were you doing like what, 60, 80 hours a week, 70 hours? What would you say?
Yeah, I would say at the beginning it was probably 70, 80. You'd come in around 6. I'd go home around like 9 or 10 p.m. But yeah, you learn quick. I would say 6 months in, you maybe shave 10 hours off your day just because you're a little bit more automated. You understand things a little bit better. You don't have to research everything quite as in depth. You get a little bit better intuition. But yeah, that's just about right.
And then in terms of pay, can we talk about how it had jumped from like operations pre-MBA to the RFP team to, and you don't have to tell me exact, but just like a range to like once you got the full the fixed income trader role? Was it like I'd assume Salt Lake City operations role, you're looking at like 50-ish. Is that around accurate, or for base?
As far as comp, back then, and again, this was like pre-massive inflation, because I have a friend right now who just got out of Cornell. She just got her first job and she's already at like, 110. Back then, I think my first night shift was like 45K with like a 6%, I think, bump because you're working nights. So you get this like 6% bonus. But yeah, that was about right. And then post MBA, I think like 110 or something like that, which I know is like now analyst salary.
Yeah, but that's not bad. That's a big jump for the 1 year MBA. And then from there, any bonus on that team, like that RFP team or anything like that, or just more like just salary?
It's a scraps though. Because, it's whatever the trading desks don't take, they kind of give to these product teams, and then the RFP guy gets a little bit, but I never tried not to complain anyway.
And then as a junior PM, like that jump to the actual trading role, was the base similar, but the bonus just jumped right up, or was it both a bump on like the base and the bonus?
I think they view like the way, I think I'm trying to say, like, how do I answer this like in a PC manner?
We don't have to share exact numbers. I'm just curious. Is it like, because I know in trading you can make, everything from like 0 all the way up to like double your salary or triple your salary.
The salary, I would say, goes up in line with just your corporate title, I would say. And then the bonuses, yes, depending on how the firm does, how the division does, how the team does. And then, as you can imagine, a money market team with 0% rates, I think when I joined, there was we went from 5 bips to 25 bips on like the overnight repo. You don't really, you have fee waivers because there's not that much return. So, you can imagine that it's very commensurate with the amount of money your desk makes.
Got it. Okay. So what kind of made you start looking around in terms of potentially, going to the hedge fund side?
So the way my team was structured is the average tenure of the PMs on the money market team, there were 6 of us total, was I think like high teens or low 20s. So, the partner of our team was there for about 30 years. There was a couple
Wow.
other guys, that was like in their kind of 20 plus years on that same team. So it wasn't a team with a lot of turnover. So I was kind of thinking, right, well, I have 8 years as a professional here. I'm still like the junior PM. So probably not gonna, be MD on this team anytime soon, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I started really, getting into just reading about Bitcoin, listening to some of the crypto podcasts out there. And then what clicked for me is not necessarily, the inflation hedge that, Bitcoin is kind of known for, but it was more like, all right, well, in my ops role and as a junior PM, you really see the inefficiencies as far as like how money moves, how settlements happen, all the fails, all the craziness and the amounts of people required to settle a single trade. I was like, well, this is a little crazy because Bitcoin, I can send it to somebody, you don't have custodians or transfer agents or, groups and groups of ops people on both sides of the counterparties. You just kind of press send to an address and then the other person just receives it. So I was like, well, this tech is definitely something because the entire Wall Street, infrastructure of Swifts and faxes and everything like that, that has to change, right? Because, Swifts have been around since the 80s and basically the infrastructure of Wall Street is not as shiny as maybe you see the front office stuff on CNBC or when you're dealing with your PM or whatever. It's very like, rusty and kind of broken, right? So I was like, all right, I need to learn more about crypto. So so I just kept listening and learning, and eventually I was like, all right, I need to go do this. And I started learning a little Python. Started really getting my quant skills together, and then I interviewed with Galois, and luckily by then I studied enough to pass some very rigorous quant interviews. They chose me to be one of their first 5 employees when we were launching the fund.
Yeah, tell me about that. So that's kind of an exciting, some people would say super risky move to go from a bulge bracket bank where you have a steady salary to, you said, a startup, basically a startup fund, right?
Yeah, it was definitely scary. I quit GS. They told me which address to show up in San Francisco. So I show up, and once I get there, I kind of realize this isn't an office building; it's an apartment complex. I meet the founder of the fund. He meets me downstairs. I go up with him, and then lo and behold, I am definitely going into an apartment. And there's 4 other guys sitting there with laptops at a little kitchen table, and I'm like, holy moly, what did I get myself into? But then they were like, well, we're doing O2C trading. This is pretty much how it works. We're doing kind of everything in spreadsheets and in Skype chat rooms. And here we are, right? And then the volume just kind of like came in super fast. We had a bunch of clients that were looking to just execute on all sorts of crypto assets, and I definitely got thrown in at the deep end of the pool. I'm so used to Bloomberg chat rooms, dealing with treasuries and repo, and giant lots, that don't really move in price.
Yeah.
And here I'm starting to look at order books and figuring out the slippage and like trying to principal quoting for clients. But you learn really fast because if you don't do it right, you're going to lose money on the hedging. When you're trying to get back to market neutral. And then that's the best teacher, is like just losing money really quick. And then eventually you figure out how to properly price people so that they take your price and you make some money on the site. So that's what I did.
Interesting. Yeah. So you're kind of, tell me a little bit about that. I think that's fascinating. So you go from this large bulge bracket bank, suddenly you're working in an apartment with 3 or 4 other people around a kitchen table, but you're learning a ton, right? And so tell me about, like, did you feel like you were prepared with the Python? Is it mostly like you're writing code? What was the day-to-day like? How did it jump? How did it switch? Like you said, I know the assets obviously were very different that you were suddenly dealing with, but what about like the day-to-day and the skills you were using?
Yeah, so I wasn't writing any code. In fact, I was the only trader at Galois that did all his scripts in Excel and VBA because I was way more familiar with it.
I love it.
On Python. When, for example, in crypto, you have to have, engineering, right? So because I learned a little bit of Python, it was easier for me to like communicate to the engineer like what I want, or be able to kind of like think about how he thinks about certain logic. right? So I wasn't necessarily writing anything, but I was able to communicate with the other guys basically in the same language.
And so how were you guys even making money? You said it was a startup fund, but it was like, how are you guys even getting any flow?
Yeah, so the founder, Kevin, he was actually the head trader over at Kraken, which is now one of the biggest exchanges in the United States and the world, really. So he had a lot of experience, and he had a lot of clients that he brought in, from Kraken to work with Galois and OTC desk. So yeah, we just had quick settlements. We would deal in pretty much any coin that we were felt was like properly approved. So we would deal with like very illiquid stuff, and I think we did a really good job and really good customer service. We were around 24/7 in these chat rooms, so I think the clients really appreciated that. It's white glove service and a wide breadth of assets.
Awesome. So like in terms of like how would somebody who's not very familiar, obviously traders would understand like in terms of how you're making the money, but like can you give me an example of a trade that you guys would do for a client? So they'd come to you and say, hey, we want to, I don't know, we want to sell short some Solana, or we want to go long, whatever. Are they saying, give me an example?
Yeah, I'll give you an example. So for example, one of the most profitable things you can do is help a VC get out of a very concentrated position. So, you have these guys, they invest in these coins like nice and early at like, 10 cents or something like that. And then the thing's like $40 and the guy has like 5% of the float. And he's like, okay, well, I got to start getting out of this thing, liquidating, but I don't want to move the market. So, you work through, you look at the volumes, you look at, how much global participation you can feed through the market without really, disturbing the price. And you're like, all right, well, Mr. VC, it'll take me the next month to liquidate this. And this is how fast we're going to do it. And this is, what algos we're going to use and which exchanges we're going to use, et cetera. So, every time he sends over a clip, you kind of price him on it. He says, okay, I accept this price. And then you have to basically hedge it while, not going below the price that the client took from you. And then basically the spread you make is your profit.
I assume for, crypto, the spread has to be pretty wide, right? Because the markets can turn on a dime, right? And
yeah, back then, spreads were way wider than they are now. I mean, in today's day and age, there are so many sophisticated players, like Jump, J Street, like all those guys are in crypto. So, spreads have tightened a lot. But back then, when there wasn't really a lot of, sophisticated OTC, the spreads were nice and wide. Yeah, you can definitely make some good money, especially if you knew how to hedge properly, on the exchanges.
And so was the goal, are they still going?
Oh yeah. Galois right now is they're still going, and they have a very advanced, algorithmic market making platform. So that's what they're focused on. So the entire Galois team right now is mostly mathematicians, computer scientists, and yeah, they do a lot of really interesting stuff. That's
cool.
That's there.
And so tell me a little bit about kind of why the move and when it happened, and what your thought process was in terms of jumping to Anchorage.
Yeah. So one of my friends from Insead, who also went from Morgan Stanley to crypto, was working at Anchorage at the time, and she was one of the salespeople here. And she's like, we're a custody platform, and we're looking to build a brokerage on top of it, and we're looking for somebody to kind of spearhead the brokerage build out.
Well, can you, let's talk a little bit about what is Anchorage, and just so the listeners know what it is.
Yeah. Good point, Patrick. Anchorage, for those listeners who may not be familiar, we are the first federally chartered OCC federal bank. So Anchorage started as a crypto custody platform. Our co-founders, Nathan and Diego, are security engineers. And they used to work at Docker. They were some of the first employees over at Square, Jack Dorsey's company. And they started Anchorage, I want to say, about 4 years ago, probably a year in stealth, and then a year as a pure custody platform. And then I got brought on to help build a trading business on top of custody.
So custody platform is that just holding assets basically?
Yeah, exactly. And it's a little bit different, for everybody who's only, familiar with how the traditional custodians work, like BNY Mellon or State Street. Crypto is just a little bit different, just because you have bearer assets that if somebody steals, your Bitcoin or your Solana tokens or whatever, like you're probably never getting them back, right? If somebody steals, I guess, like a share of Boeing from State Street, there's a transfer agent who says, well, that's not the thieves. That actually belongs over here. So they just move it to the computer. And cryptographic assets don't work like that. They're bare assets. So secure crypto custody is of extreme importance in the crypto space.
Got it. So it was almost like the first kind of, would you say, large or trusted kind of large platform, custodial platform for digital assets?
Yeah, it wasn't the first.
Like how does it relate? Like how would I see Coinbase versus like an Anchorage, I guess?
Yeah, so Anchorage, I can definitely take this in a very technical direction, but I think at its base level, most custodians at the time were what we call, I guess, like pirate custody, right? So you take, a private key, you kind of divide it into three pieces, and you kind of put it in three different areas, which have different security procedures, and you need kind of like the entire key to sign something so that an asset gets transferred. What the Anchorage system is, it's what we call hardware security modules. They're used in a lot of military grade security aspects and other use cases. Feel free for the listeners who are more interested in this. Google hardware security modules. You open a rabbit hole you can get for weeks and months, right? But basically, it's air-gapped HSMs. They're not connected to the internet. And basically, you have military-grade security, but also with a very fast speed of withdrawals. So without going too much further into technical details, that's how Anchorage works. It's more of it just doesn't have that sharding of private keys.
Interesting. Really cool. Okay. So in terms of, your Insead classmate convincing you to come over there, what convinced you? Was it pay? Was it the trajectory of the firm? What was exciting to you?
Yeah. So I met Nathan and I talked to him about his vision. Nathan's he does a lot of podcasts and panels on YouTube, so you can watch him. He's an incredibly passionate guy. Really has a good vision. I think he has an incredible understanding of global macro, the regulatory environment. Kind of has a good vision of where the world's going and finance, where finance is going. So I had a dinner with him, and I really liked what he had to say, and I think I had a really good experience at Galois, kind of building that business. Kind of helping Kevin and Mael build it from the beginning. So I thought I had a little bit of experience in building. And Nathan wanted me to come in and help build kind of this brokerage more or less from scratch. So I took it a little bit as a challenge. I was like, all right, well, I'm either going to, crash and burn and fail, or this is going to be successful and who knows where it can lead. So luckily, so far, it hasn't failed. And we're obviously, building a lot. We're hiring a lot of people, just as an example, I was employee, I want to say like 20 something, I think.
Wow.
And then now we're approaching almost 200. And again, we started the brokerage business with chat rooms and spreadsheets, and now we have fully automated, 24/7 API enabled RFQ platforms, automated, just about everything. And we're getting ready to scale the business even further. So yeah, it's so far it's been an incredibly, rewarding process of building.
So do you think you're going to be with Anchorage till IPO time, or what's the thought process?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have absolutely no desire to be anywhere besides Anchorage, anywhere besides crypto in the next for the next near future.
Next decade or so.
Quite amazing. Yeah, that's for sure. I think the business is going in the right direction without a doubt.
Great, Yuriy. So just looking back at your whole path, or your whole path through your career so far, any final words of wisdom before we call the pod, in terms of just looking back and saying, wow, I'm here and I would have never thought it, or anything that the listeners should pay attention to?
Yeah. Look, no matter how comfortable you are in whatever role you may be in, just always be willing to take risks. I felt if I never went to crypto, to a small fund from, my very comfortable seat at Goldman, life would be a lot different right now, and not for the better. I think that was one of the greatest choices I think I've made in my life, even though it was super scary at the time. And the interesting thing here too is, I joined Galois in the crypto industry during the start of a very prolonged bear market back in February of 2018. So for that whole year, I was full of a lot of self-doubt, but I just put my head down and built. And Kevin, luckily, he's been in Bitcoin since like 2013, so he's been through plenty of bear markets, so he kept me sane. The one thing I would say to people is always be open to new opportunities and don't just feel comfortable. Always push yourself to new limits and test yourself and your skills.
That's great. I love that. And was it a big pay cut kind of going to the smaller startup for initially, or did it do so well? Huge pay cut. Yeah, sure. but you're happy and excited every day waking up.
Oh, so even though it was a huge pay cut overall, I would say the last 4 years in crypto altogether have been a big raise over what I would have made it.
Because you personally have been investing in crypto.
Well, a little bit of everything, right? I mean, when you join any company as one of the original employees, you get a lot of you don't get a lot of cash, and that's what I meant by pay cut.
Yeah,
you get a lot of equity, which isn't like worth a lot when you get it, but when you build the company, you're like, oh wow, like over the last 2 years, my equity's kind of gone up like a pretty crazy amount, right?
Yeah,
and the trajectory seems to be, in target for it to go up even more, right? So even though you may be a little bit more cash poor, overall your all-in comp can really grow exponentially if you're building something that's special.
Well, it's not capped either, right? It's not capped like whereas Goldman it was like kind of capped in the sense of you could go stepwise, but you're not going to see that parabolic jump.
Yeah, exactly. Like, in GSAM in general, it's like, you're kind of going to move a little bit up and down with how the firm and the division does. But overall, like, unless you're making 50x returns, which, isn't really the case right now, just because of just general risk aversion and zero rates. Probably you don't have that potential up there.
Do you have any strong opinions on just DeFi in general, or the timing of how long some of the stuff will take if before it kind of disintermediates some of the banks or any of that stuff? Do you feel like this is years away? Do you feel like it's decades away? What's your thought process on that?
Yeah, look, the DeFi stuff works. Like for example, like Yearn Finance, YFI, for you folks out there, is something that can literally replace an entire money market PM team at a bank. As it's like smart allocates across like, the highest yielding like instruments out there, right? So there's definitely the tech is there, and the tech is kind of at a point where it's starting to scale. Now, what's going to hold it up is I think a lot of the regulatory questions that are in existence. The U.S. regulators, I feel, are interested in making this work. Because they definitely don't want the United States to fall behind as a technology leader, but they also don't want, for example, a big insurance company or a big asset manager to get defrauded because, they overlooked something, right? So while it's going slow, like I'll tell you, I work a lot with our legal team and our compliance team and, how we can, get this license, that license, can trade this, can trade that, can trade in different jurisdictions. And I do feel that the regulators are definitely open. We engage them, very, we engage the regulators a lot, and I feel they're very open to, I guess, moving this industry forward. Although, if you just read Twitter and the media, it may not seem like that.
Fair enough. Well, Yuriy, I really appreciate your time. Sorry I was late, and hopefully everyone enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you, Patrick. Yeah, very good talking to you.
And thanks to you, my listeners at Wall Street Oasis. If you have any suggestions whatsoever, please don't hesitate to send them my way, patrick@wallstreetoasis.com. Until next time.